From the land of conjurers, flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the Witching Hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am Giant of the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing, Jenny?
Doing great. Our kid won the spelling bee today. You guys are so excited.
Yeah. Yes,
she won the whole
child.
the whole school spelling bee. Yeah,
the whole school spelling bee. I know. We got to brag on her a little bit, right?
Yeah, she didn't get it from me. You guys know that because I can't pronounce anything or spell anything. It must be from your side of the family, Frosty.
Maybe so, but yeah, we got to do a little bragging. So yeah, we were super excited, and we just found out that she was even doing it like last night because she didn't want to tell us. So
yeah, she just like slid the papers onto the kitchen counter. I'm like, belly bang. Then we spent like 3 hours like studying words, and it was all worth it.
Yeah, she did it. Yeah, it was quite an achievement for her in her young career.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Off we go. So yeah, we've been bragging a little bit. We got one won the spelling bee, and we got one that just went off to boot camp in Great Lakes. So
yes, yeah.
Which, from what I understand, they're going to be having a well, I don't know if they'll call it a blizzard, but they're supposed to get like a foot of snow this weekend.
Yeah.
So, we didn't have any snow last year. So he's going to be, Wander's going to be experiencing some different weather patterns. We'll just put it that way. And also to do a little bit more bragging, just so everybody knows, the music we have playing at the beginning of the show before the movie is Linguist's song. Yeah. Me and her worked on that together.
I thought everybody knew that already. I guess you guys didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, we've been using it for a while. Well, see, the problem was me and her worked on it, and we wanted to use it at the beginning of the show, like when we do the movie, but I couldn't really get it to work in that manner. So, and we got it at the beginning, kind of in the starting soon thing. And it gets me going. I get to bopping before we get on here. So.
Yeah, I get pumped just listen to it every week.
So thank you, Linus, for that again.
So Frosty, what kind of weird news do you have for us this week?
Yeah, we got. Let's go ahead and get to the weird news. So, some similar stories today. The first one I have is the first space photo from the U.S.'s moon lander mission is a clear sign something is very wrong. The first U.S.-built lunar lander since the days of Apollo will not be able to complete its mission after a faulty valve likely caused a fuel leak. Peregrine Mission 1, a lunar lander built by Astrobotic, started leaking fuel hours after it launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida on Monday. The leak has been forcing the spacecraft's thrusters to operate beyond capacity to prevent it from tumbling out of control. Astrobotic on Tuesday afternoon estimated that based on the amount of fuel the spacecraft is gobbling up to keep from tumbling out of control, it could maintain stability for the next 40 hours. At this time, the goal is to get Peregrine as close to lunar distance as we can before it loses the ability to maintain its sun-pointing position and subsequently loses power, Astrobotic said in an update on X on Tuesday. On Monday, Astrobotic released the first image of Peregrine in space, and where you can see the silvery multi-layer insulation in the foreground, which looks as if someone took a hammer to it. And essentially,
who's hammering these things as they go out into space?
I guess the problem came from having pressurized helium rush from one tank to another, and there was oxidizer involved, and so it caused rocket fuel to ignite. And so they said, the company said a soft moon landing is no longer possible in the remaining hours. Spacecraft Astrobotic is trying to glean as much data as it can. I looked for updates. I saw a story last night, and I didn't see any updates today. So I imagine they're like hard at work, like trying to figure the problem out. And if there's any updates, feel free to put it in chat.
I want to know what are they going to do with it? They're just going to like let it float around in space now?
Well, I think the plan. Well, they said a soft moon landing wasn't possible. They didn't rule out a hard moon landing, so it could be. It might be safer to crash into the moon rather than have it just floating around up there in orbit. You know, that could be a possibility.
It's going to end up there and like crash into the poor Indian whatever they got, like blow that up too.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is I already had a news story ready to go for that today, which was the Navajo Nation objects to a plan to send human remains to the moon. So a plan to deposit some human remains on the moon as part of a rocket launch that blasted off early Monday is prompting criticism from the head of the Navajo Nation, who says it would be desecration of the celestial body that's so sacred to many tribes. The president of the Navajo Nation urged NASA or other government officials in a statement last week to address the tribe's concerns before this launch. He said the moon holds a sacred place in Navajo cosmology. The suggestion of transforming it into a resting place for human remains is deeply disturbing and unacceptable to our people and many other tribal nations. The mission is not being run by NASA, but rather by a private company, which we just talked about. The first time an American firm would land a craft on the moon, Peregrine Mission 1 launched into space on a United Launch Alliance rocket transporting a lunar lander made by the company Astrobotic, which itself will carry multiple payloads to the moon. So the question now is, what? Also, we know that human remains are on Peregrine as well.
They were already on there?
Yeah.
I thought it was like a hypothetical thing, like, oh, people might want to send their bodies up to the moon.
No, Peregrine was transporting.
It's already got it on there.
Yeah, and actually, human remains have already been taken to the moon before. I saw that in the article as well. So it wouldn't be the first time.
So we've left bags of moon poop, and now we're sending up dead bodies. Humans.
And I guess we can talk a little later about maybe what else has already been on the moon. So, you know, it's all, I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about colonization and stuff like that, there's going to be those kinds of things that happen eventually. So maybe some of the shaman or something had something to do with the...
Yeah, I don't know.
Not making it. I don't know.
Hoaxer said it was his fault that he had the hammer.
Yeah, and in similar news, like I said today, things are kind of going around in circles. In similar news, NASA delays the first Artemis astronaut flight to late 2025 and the moon landing to 2026. NASA's first crewed Artemis mission, a flight to send 4 astronauts on a voyage around the moon and back, is delayed nearly a year from late 2024 to at least September of 2025, NASA announced Tuesday. Likewise, the first astronaut moon landing is slipping from late 2025 to September of 2026. As a remind everybody at every turn, safety is our top priority, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson told reporters during an afternoon teleconference. To give Artemis teams more time to work through the challenges with first-time developments and integration, we're going to give them more time on Artemis 2 and 3. We are adjusting our schedule to target Artemis 2 for September of 2025 and September of 2026 for Artemis 3, which will send humans for the first time to the lunar South Pole. Artemis 4 remains on track for September 2028, and though challenges are clearly ahead, our teams are making incredible progress, said Nelson. So rumors of the delays have been circulating for months, and now they have actually been reported.
Yeah. You talked about this last night when you were reading that. And it's like, you know, we went in the 60s. That's a long time ago now. Like, what happened?
1969. Yeah. We could land on the moon. Yeah.
Why can't we do it now?
Yeah. We went up there with a stick of gum and some paper clips and made it happen.
Like aluminum foil. And
and I guess, it's like riding a bike, or maybe it's not like riding a bike.
Yeah.
And then the last news story of tonight is scientists find about 250,000 invisible nanoplastic particles in a liter of bottled water. The average liter of bottled water has nearly 250,000.
Why do you always got to give us these terrifying water stories, Frosty? Like that's supposed to be the thing we're supposed to be drinking to be healthy, and then you keep giving us all these terrible water stories. I guess,
is it better if you don't know, or is it better if you know? I don't know.
I don't know.
The average liter of bottled water has nearly 250,000 invisible pieces of ever so tiny nanoplastics detected and categorized for the first time by a microscope using dual lasers. Scientists long figured there were lots of these microscopic plastic pieces, but until researchers at Columbia and Rutgers universities did their calculations, they never knew how many or what kind. Looking at 5 samples, each of 3 common bottled water brands, researchers found particle levels range from 110,000 to 400,000 per liter, averaging out at around 240,000, according to a study in Monday's Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. These are particles that are less than a micron in size. There are 25,400 microns, also called micrometers, because it's a millionth of a meter in an inch. A human hair is about 83 microns wide. Previous studies have looked at a slightly bigger microplastics that range from visible, 5 millimeters, to less than a quarter of an inch. About 10 to 100 times more nanoplastics than microplastics were discovered in bottled water, this study found. Researchers still can't answer the big question, are those nanoplastic pieces harmful to our health? That's currently under review. We don't know if it's dangerous or how dangerous, said study co-author Phoebe Stapleton, a toxicologist at Rutgers. We do know that they are getting into the tissues of mammals, including people, and the current research is looking at what they're doing in the cells. All 4 co-authors interviewed said they were cutting back on their bottled water use after they conducted the study. Wee Min, the Columbia physical chemist who pioneered the dual laser microscope technology, said he has reduced his bottled water use by half. Stapleton said she now relies more on filtered water at home in New Jersey, but a study co-author Baizan Yan, a Columbia environmental chemist who increased his tap water usage, pointed out that filters themselves can be a problem by introducing plastics. He said, there's just no win.
So I guess just plastic, we know plastics aren't good, but we use it for like everything. Yeah.
So whether you're using bottled water or whether you're using filters, I guess the best place to get your water is from a well at this point, we've kind of found, didn't we do an article where they were finding nanoplastics in your well water? And so really there's no way at this point. I guess it's just
everywhere.
Finding out what the nanoplastics are going to do.
Yeah, they're going to turn us into plastic. We're going to be Barbies and Ken dolls.
Yeah. Well, that was the news.
Yay.
Not, sometimes I try to get some uplifting stuff in there, Everybody go have a glass of water and settle down.
Yeah. Drink your water. Everything's fine.
Put it in your plastic sippy cup and go on.
Oh, man. Frosty, who is with us tonight?
So,
who are our guests today?
Here we go. So, Leslie and Stephen Shaw, authors of Who They Are and What They're Up To, both have a lifelong love affair with the subject of ufology. They are very well read in the genre and both consider themselves to be armchair ufologists, and they've both been UFO witnesses. Leslie Shaw was born in downtown Los Angeles in 1959. She's been writing, drawing, and painting since childhood. She attended El Camino College part-time for a few years and majored in fine art with a minor in art history, including ancient art history studies. So we might have even more to talk about tonight, Jenny. She transferred to the prestigious California Institutes of Arts and graduated from Cal Arts with a bachelor's degree in experimental animation. Leslie worked in motion control camera effects for movies and television for 5 years, then in television for 9 years doing computer animation. After moving to the high desert, she began doing computer graphics for the High Desert Star and then moved into the editorial department where she worked as a journalist and paginator for 17 years. Stephen Shaw's education began at the Montessori School. He developed a proclivity for languages, music, math, and sciences. Stephen writes, records, and performs classical and jazz music. He served 6 years in the United States Navy. He was a state licensed practitioner of Chinese medicine and acupuncture for 20 years and a teacher of the Yang and Qin styles of Tai Chi Quan. And he'll let me know if I mispronounced that, for 23 years. Stephen and his extended family all have had missing time incidents and are likely to be UFO abductees. Stephen studied geology in college and is a lifelong rock hound, which I'm sure is something else we can talk about on this show. Please welcome to the show, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank
Hello.
you so much for having us.
Can you hear us both?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Oh, good.
All is well. There was no
Yay.
reason to worry. You guys are good.
Congratulations on the military stuff up in what, Lake Michigan area? Is that Navy boot camp? It used to have a
Yeah.
Navy boot camp.
Yeah,
He's
that's
in
still
Navy
where.
boot camp. Yeah,
That's one
his
of the
first
three
day
I
was
went to.
Monday.
I went to on May 24th. In 1980, I went to the San Diego boot camp. So, and I know there was the Florida and the Michigan. I felt lucky getting San Diego. The weather
Yeah,
was so
really.
much more pleasant.
Yeah.
Thank
They
you
only-
for
They only have the Navy
nice
at
intro.
Great Lakes now.
Yeah, they put them all at Great Lakes, Illinois, is where all
Yeah.
of the Navy boot camp is now.
And
So-
congrats on your speller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Little
So
speller.
exciting.
So cute.
Was the word onomatopoeia?
Well,
She actually won the spelling bee with the word Garth, which I didn't even realize was a word. I thought it was just like,
yeah, besides
like
the name, I didn't know
like
it was
Wayne and Garth,
Mm.
something to do with fishing.
Yeah, it
And
had something to do with fishing.
I will say I was pretty humbled because there were quite a few words on her list that not only could I not spell them, but I had no clue what they were. So it was pretty some pretty serious words in there for
very impressive.
Yeah. Which,
teenagers.
speaking of impressive, both of you had very impressive bios there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parallels here. So I also went to art school, Leslie.
Did you?
And yeah, VCU. And then Frosty also was a musician who was in the Army. So, and then we're all here to talk about weird stuff. So
Very
Yeah.
weird.
So-
So weird.
So a lot. So I guess, I always say, to start off the interviews here is, where do we get started? And I guess it's kind of talking about the beginning. So we know that you have the book. There's a link to the book up at the top of the chat. So if you click on that, that'll take you to the Amazon sites so you can look that over. How did you guys kind of get started with all this?
Stephen had the first experiences at age 3.
Yes. Well, we've been together now for 30 years, and throughout our relationship, I had told her some of the unusual things that happened to my family. As far as being a medium, my mother was a medium, and her mother's sister were mediums. My parents
wonderful.
came from Great Britain and Germany, and my dad was from Scotland and England, and my mom was so I'm basically part German, part Scottish, part English. I was born in the States, so we grew up being exposed to automatic writing, things that just didn't make any sense. Especially when I was a child, I just wouldn't talk to my friends about it in school.
oh yeah.
My first experience that I can remember vividly was when I was 3 years old in bed, and I would sometimes be awakened by this little playful being that would be jumping on my chest and on my stomach that would wake me up. It was kind of playful, but I couldn't see it, but it was there. And you grow up in a family of mediums. We had this family spirit guide that's called Old Glegley that would visit people from time to time. So I grew up in the family knowing that we had a family spirit guide. I knew my mom could automatic write, that she would know things about people that she could not have known. Like, as an example, she knew when her mother died, when her father died, and when her Uncle Clifford died in England, way before anybody else did. I remember her
Wow.
picking me up from school one morning in 1969, in the afternoon, and she was crying, said, "My mom just died." So, well, how do you know? Well, I was contacted through automatic writing, and sure enough, I'd seen many things throughout my time when my mom was still alive, where she had the gift.
They're a very
Mhm.
psychic bunch in general.
Yeah, and
Stephen
I have
has-
some of that myself too.
He's constantly pulling words out of my head. In fact, some really strange ones too that can't be coincidence.
So fast forward a bit
Yeah.
to when I was 9 years old. I was sleeping in the top of a bunk bed. My brother was he's 6 years younger, so he was 3. And I heard this strange sound in the living room, and I quietly got off the bunk bed and I started walking down the hallway, and my heart was pounding in my chest, and I was really scared. I don't know. I had no idea what it was. I know it wasn't a dog. And I just about ready to turn the corner, and my mind just goes blank. Next thing I know, I'm back in my bed 2 or 3 hours later, and I'm sleeping just naturally. And I didn't talk about it. It was just a weird thing. And the next thing that was really significant happened when I was 18 years old in January of 1979. This was witnessed by my father, my sister, and myself at the same house. It started with the first night. My dad went to sleep in his bedroom and his closet doors opened and closed on him. And my dad he grew up in World War II as a child. He was not he was a cabinet maker as I was at the time. And so he was not one for flights of fancy. So we just kind of, brushed it off. And the next night, I gave him this little book to read by Paramahansa Yogananda called Metaphysical Meditations. And I went back to my room and just about 9:30 at night, and he came and knocked on my door. He said, "Stephen, I must be hearing things." I said, "What?" "I hear a silver bell inside the wall by the chimney." So I said, "Okay, yep, there's a silver bell inside the 2x4 wall, just being rung, just like a silver bell." So then I went to my sister, who basically was trying to turn a blind eye to any of this family old likely stuff. She just didn't want to be involved. But she heard it too. And we banged on the wall, looked up the chimney, tried to make some explanation. The weird thing, what happened too, is that the weirder thing that happened was the next night. Okay. The next night I'm sleeping in my bunk bed, but this time on the bottom of the bunk bed. And I'm awakened by this whoosh, 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 whizzing sound in the air. Now, there happened to be the kitchen light was on, so I could kind of see down the hallway. So I just turned over, I looked down the hallway, and I thought, well, that was strange, but it was maybe I just imagined it. Turned on my left side to try and go back to sleep, and then the bed started being pushed 2 distinct shoves from the base of the bed. And I thought, well, living in California, maybe it's a little bit of an earthquake. So then I continued to try and, to justify it, to, rationalize it. And then it happened again, but a little bit stronger. And then it happened a third time, even stronger. And now I'm getting kind of frustrated and scared. And then I get 3 distinct taps on my right shoulder, like an index finger going tap, tap, tap. At this point, I'm both terrified and angry. And so I whirled around. I said, "What?" And there was nothing there visible. And then I lose track of time again.
But then
I lose track of time.
Wow.
Now, the next night, I told my dad what had happened, right? But the next night, I decided I don't want to sleep in that room. Okay, so I said, okay, I'm going to sleep in the living room on the couch. I was wearing my cabinet making clothes from the night before. And I woke up about 5:30 in the morning, 6 maybe, about 5:30, I think it was. And I looked at my piano because I'm a pianist and an accordionist, a musician most of my life. And I was thinking about what I was going to play. And I heard the fountain in the other room, and it's too early to get up. And from behind me, from the front door, this blue-white tall being came from behind me like it walked at a very, very fast pace. It got to my side, covered 25, 30 feet in about a second and a half. And it stopped by my right side, and you might as well just basically bisect my body in half right down the middle. The whole right side of my body, the whole nervous system was just shut off. I could not move. I could not feel, but it wasn't a scary paralyzing. It was just, I couldn't move. And I thought, oh my God, I'm actually going to see the family spirit guide, Old Glegley.
Yeah.
And so part of me was thinking, oh, this is going to be really cool. But the whole room was also filled up with blue white light. It wasn't just the being. The whole house was completely filled with blue white light. And so I'm thinking 50% excited, 50% scared because I can't move. And it bent down to my ear and it said, "Hi, Steve," in a whisper that I could not tell whether it was male or female. And it stayed there for a little while, indeterminate. I stayed in that state, and then it left through the front door. And then again, I don't know if I went and told my dad. To this day, I don't know whether I went back to sleep or whether I have missing time. It just would have been me. If that's something like happened to me like that now,
you would remember.
I would remember it. So the coup de grace on this is that 6 hours later, I was getting hungry. It was about 11:30. I said, "I'll go down to Jack in the Box, Dad." So I reached into my right-hand side pocket and pulled out the coins I had. And the coins I had were regular American coins, and they were all sticking together. They were all magnetized. I could pick up the coins
Wow.
with the coins. My dad looked at me, and he did chemistry and all kinds of stuff when he was in school, and
It's
knew
supposed to
about
be
magnetics. Since it's and I still to this day do not have an answer for that.
U.S.
Now-
coins are specifically meant to not get magnetized,
Right, so
that they can go in Coke machines
Yeah.
and Pepsi
Yeah.
machines.
The TSA won't be pulling you over all the time, So,
Mm-hmm.
but and then I think it was the last thing was the night after that, which I have no memory of. My dad was awakened, and his bedroom kind of faced mine down. There's a hallway between our bedrooms, and he was awakened, and he again in the middle of the night, and there was this wall of blue white light that was inside and outside of my room. I went back to bed in my regular bedroom that night, and he had this voice in his head tell him, "Don't worry, Jeffrey, everything's fine. Just go back to sleep. Nothing to worry about."
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about that the next day. And then
Wow.
it just stopped.
And then poor Philip, Stephen's brother, he was also experiencing similar phenomenon. When he was a young child, he would sleep in his bedroom closet because he was afraid of the little men.
Oh.
And he did that for a couple of years. And then he told me another time that he saw a gray alien standing in his room right before he blacked out.
Wow.
In Stephen's case, we've tried hypnotic regression and have not been able to break through the memory block to see
Wow.
what happened in those blackout times.
Mhm.
And so we don't really, for a long time, we didn't know what we were dealing with until we heard from Philip that he saw a gray alien in his room. Now we know what we're
Yeah.
dealing with here. And and poor Philip, he did not live a normal life. The trauma of this early terror really affected him. He never had a long-term relationship. He was a brilliant man. He could teach calculus. He just taught calculus for fun. you know.
College level, he taught
Yeah.
calculus,
Mhm.
but he was a draftsman. He got drafted right out of high school.
And he was a
Uh,
brilliant man, but he was emotionally unstable for his whole life. And he had a lot of phenomenon. We're just scratching the surface here
Yeah.
on how many things.
And I
happened.
I had asked him numerous times about if he could remember things when he was a kid, and he would always put up this block saying, "I really have no memory of that time." He just could
Mhm.
would always block and say, "I don't remember that time." It's like a big part of his childhood was he just doesn't know,
Yeah.
has
Just
no
empty.
clue.
Yeah, has but so forgive me for going back, but you said the first instance you had, you were 3 years old, if I'm not mistaken. How old were you when you had this other event?
Oh,
18.
18.
Oh,
I was
18,
18.
18.
Yes,
Okay.
I was
Mhm.
18. Yes. I've had other events happen since then, and I could tell you things about that happened to my mother and other things that I know. And like I say, I grew up in a family of a line of spiritualists, automatic writers. My grandmother could automatic write in 2 different languages. One was like an Arabic language, which she didn't even know.
Oh wow.
Because my grandfather, he was a fitter for mills, and he would go away for 2 years at a time, like to Spain or to Saudi Arabia or to Mexico. So she didn't see a lot of her father, but he was quite a character himself, old Harry Rowe.
And we're also UFO witnesses too. Stephen has seen 5 in his life, and the last 2 were I was present as well, and those are my only 2. But
Well,
it
tell
was
us
in
about those.
Yeah,
Well,
in 2005.
that's
Sorry?
it. That's interesting though, because
Mhm.
that's kind of something that goes along with abductions and stuff, right? Is the idea that you kind of have like this recurring seeing UFOs, like that's kind
Well,
of part of what tends to happen for the most
I'm not
part.
really sure if any of Steve's sightings had
Mhm.
anything to do with the abduction, if they were
No,
related
none
to
of
that.
the sightings I've had any direct,
But we just got lucky seeing them in the sky a few times. Together, our first one together was in 2005, and it was my first. And I had been believing Stephen as much as I could,
Mhm.
all the bizarre things he was telling me. But there's always that little kernel of doubt. until you see your first UFO. And then
Mhm.
now I
Mhm.
believed him 100%
Yeah.
right after that.
Until you experience it yourself, or you're always like, yeah, like maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah.
There's a bit of doubting Thomas in all of this, as my mom would say.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then
like
I
I'm
saw
on your side. I'm on your side. I'm not saying I don't believe you, but there's always a little bit of doubt that creeps in until you've witnessed it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
until you see it, and then you can't unsee it. You can't
Yeah.
ever
Yep.
go back to that happy place where you know they don't exist, or you can
Yeah.
try and believe they don't exist. But we were traveling on Highway 62, which is in Joshua Tree, coming home to our Yucca Valley home, and up in the sky in front of us, I was driving, and up in the sky in front of us, I saw a bright white light, and I thought, oh, it's a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport, maybe. But then I'm staring at it, and it's not behaving like a plane. It also doesn't have any of those other blinking lights on planes. And it got brighter and brighter. It just seemed to be hovering, and we were hurtling along about 65 miles an hour on the highway there towards it. And then suddenly it shot away over the northern horizon and gone in less than a quarter of a second.
Mm.
It must have been traveling and it instantly went at speed. It didn't start slowly going fast and then go fast. It just instantly went at what had to have been. If I were going to guess, I would have said 20,000 miles an hour. Just ridiculous speed, ludicrous speed. like
Spaceballs, ludicrous speed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, that's a very typical sighting, though. I mean, I've heard it so many times. That's just, there it was, it's traveling slowly, or it's sitting still, and then going back to the intro, so it takes off in the flash of an eye,
Yeah.
And Leslie should tell you about the second one we saw together here where we live.
Yeah, and then it was actually kind of similar, a white ball of light in the sky, but moving in bizarre zigzag motions, really fast and stop, hover, and then zigzag, and it was making turns like V turns. You know how when we turn an aircraft, we have to slowly bank around in like a big U-turn, but with them, they were just instantly able to shoot at a different angular direction. And then again, it shot off north and gone.
And of course, soundless. And it actually looked like it was fairly big considering, and it was very, very bright white. It was about 9:30 at night. We have a very small outside deck, and we had just moved in from Yucca Valley. And it was almost like, I almost felt like it was like greeting us or saying that, hey, we know where you are, because it was in such a small space of air. And actually, there was a couple who was living on our street, a younger couple that actually saw it at the same time too, that we found out like about a month later.
So it was corroborated by another couple. And then he saw a USO fly up out of the ocean off the coast of Malibu.
Yes.
Shoot away too.
I was at the Chart House. I was still commuting into Los Angeles and Woodland Hills to do acupuncture.
That's a famous restaurant.
At the Chart House. And, there's a lot of USO activity off of Malibu, and which I wasn't really thinking about at the time. This was October of 2004 2004. I know, because the Yankees and the Red Sox were playing. So anyways, I went out to get my car, and I asked the valet to get my car, and he got my car, and we see this thing come up out of the ocean, off the coast, and it's white. And we look at each other, and it just kind of hovers there for a while, goes up high, then does some zigzags, and just leaves. I said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Oh yeah, I saw that." Okay, so that was one, and then about a couple years later, I was no longer going to LA. I was coming down the Old Woman Springs Pass in Yucca Valley, and there was this silver object that was just hovering in the sky. It wasn't a blimp, wasn't an airplane, wasn't a helicopter. And actually, people were calling into the radio station about it. Says, "Are you seeing this UFO?" This was a daytime sighting.
Wow.
So I said, "Okay, all right,
like a silver ship."
That's interesting. Right? Yeah.
I wish I'd seen that one.
The very first one I saw when I was 10. This one, now I think of it, that one was at the Fallbrook House. It was a bright orange globe that was in the sky, pretty big, and it was going from west to east over the Woodland Hills area. And I called Griffith Park the next day about it and asked if they had seen anything. Says, no, young man, we have our telescopes pointed in a different direction. So So, but no, that was it was. So those are our five.
Yeah. So we started, after I'm the writer in the family as a profession, and so after I saw my first, I started getting ideas about writing the book, and then we started researching. I don't know if we were so much researching of the book as just researching in general, wanting to learn more about it, and our early research was showing that UFO theories and UFO phenomena were not in alignment. What facts we had, it wasn't aligning, especially to do with the abduction phenomenon. The theories at the time were just that UFOs, the beings in the UFOs, are curious about us. It's just scientific curiosity, and they want to take a smattering of the human race to kind of just learn about us, just nice, innocent. So they take a sample and put them back, and everything's fine. But what we discovered is that is not what's going on. What's happening is that the UFO abduction, the alien abduction phenomenon is almost entirely a Caucasian phenomenon.
It's in the high 90s.
Yeah, one of the reports I read was 94.6% of those abductees are Caucasian. And we only make up something like 16% of the population. So
Right.
They're not taking a cross sampling of humanity. They're taking a very specific race and genetic model that their criteria is after. And then when they find someone they like, as far as their genetic criteria, they take that person again and again and again and again through their lives. And then they'll start taking their children and their grandchildren. So it tends to be in a very bizarre genome. To me, it was like
Harvesting
a product more than taking scientific samples. I make an analogy in the book about a farmer's cow. The farmer abducts his cow in the morning into the barn, removes the product he wants, and then puts the cow back out in the fields to make more of the product. And then the other bizarre phenomenon we started researching in the abduction phenomenon was the breeding program. Dr. Jacobs Professor David M. Jacobs, he did 10,000 abductee regressions, hypnotic regressions in his long career.
I'm familiar with Dr. Jacobs.
Yeah, so you know his work. But he discovered that 1,100 out of the 10,000 were women who claimed that they were taken and then impregnated, and then 4 months later they come and take the fetus, and then years later they're taken again and introduced to their hybrid children. And so this breeding program was a whole different thing. Now we had to start researching that.
Yes, because a lot of these women too, they were seeing obstetricians, they were having typical ultrasounds done, showed that they had a fetus growing naturally, and then all of a sudden the fetus is gone, and actually the doctor is saying, I can't tell that you were ever pregnant.
It's like they vacuum out the entire.
Well, they take them out some way safely, that's for sure.
So I wanted to go back real quick. I wanted to go back real quick to something we were talking about, because it seems quite astonishing when you were talking about the fact that most abductions, I guess, were like people of European descent. I know that one of the first cases was, of course, were
Betty and
Barney Hill, and of course, Barney was African American.
Yes, but we believe Betty was the target because Betty's niece and sister were also taken.
Yes,
so we think that she was the main target, and of course, but you've already got Barney. You might as well take a sample there too. And
I was curious too. Do you know if those numbers were just looking at the United States, or whether those numbers were like? Because I really don't know, to be honest, like what the rate of abductions on like in other countries or other continents.
That is a good question. I can't give you definitive on that, but like I say, if you look at the world population, we are 16%.
That one study I was telling you about was U.S. based. So, and of course, the U.S. is made up of more Caucasians. So I believe the phenomenon is going to be more common here. And also there's, we believe that beings that are taking people are actually close cousins to us. They and I think this is why we all of the aliens, no matter what kind they're supposed to be, they're all bipedal hominids. We believe they're actually a splinter group from the human race that separated from us thousands and thousands of years ago, many thousands, like 13,000 years ago, and have mutated since then. And that's why they walk perfectly upright like us. That's why when people see them, they mistake them for human children until they get close enough to realize that the heads are a little too large and the eyes are too big and too black. But from a distance, they move exactly like human beings. So if they move like us, they have to have an almost identical skeletal structure and musculature system.
Well, I was just talking to Jenny about that the other day. I saw like a little short or something from Neil deGrasse Tyson, who of course is a huge skeptic and kind of a poo-pooer of all the things that are going on. But I think he does raise some good points sometimes. And one of those was they were talking about the mummies, the alien mummies that they're looking into in Mexico. And was talking about the likelihood that life could come from another part of the galaxy and have a nose cavity and have two eye sockets and have a mouth and have fingers and a thumb.
Clavicles.
Like the idea that life would evolve the same way that it did on Earth. I mean, the chances of that being recreated would be astronomical.
So and we're hearing new stuff about that. And that the blue aliens come from that star,
Andromeda,
and the other ones come from that star. So we're not talking about these. We don't subscribe to these theories.
As I tell Leslie, I think a lot of this boils down to a single word: necessity. The reason why they're taking us, the reason why they exsanguinate our cows.
It's why they need us.
It's not research and development. It is for a specific need. They need DNA. In fact, Linda Moulton Howe once said that he who controls the genetics of a planet controls the planet. So we're moving more in that direction anyway with AI and genetics. So it's true. Genetics are really the key. And they're taking our blood, they're taking our tissue samples, and it's not for
sperm and egg.
And sperm and eggs.
So, and did you ever hear about the Dulce papers?
Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Dulce, it's the ufology community calls the Dulce underground base the Dulce Air Force Base. And it's really an underground base of 7 layers down. And the bottom 2 layers are supposed to be joint alien military usage. And a security guard one time went down into the lower layer levels where he was not supposed to go, but he did anyway. And what he saw were hundreds of these vats growing hybrid gray human beings in them, and also grays in them. And I believe this is where they're bringing the fetuses, what they take, to finish growing in these vats.
Yes, that Dulce Mesa, the indigenous tribe, has been actually seeing UFOs and come out of the mesa for literally probably thousands, or at least a couple thousand years, whatever. It's in their lore. They say, oh, they're our star brothers. So it's nothing new to them.
And witnesses in that tribe say that there was a large mesa wall that goes up near where they live, and they say that the mesa just opens up like a hole in it, and all this bright white light floods out of it, and then they see UFOs flying in and out of it.
Well, that doesn't sound too much different than things that people have been talking about for a while now, with like Skinwalker Ranch and stuff like that. So kind of similar things.
So we think that this branch off race of ours that split from us a really long time ago, they occupy this solar system in various locations. We think there's bases on Mars, bases on the moon, bases underground on the Earth,
whole cities,
or in the Earth, and also they're in motherships, distributed cloaked motherships that it's in. Because I've heard of these people, they'll see a giant mothership up in the sky and it'll just vanish right in front of them. So either they're zooming away so fast that they blinked and it was just gone, or they're cloaking themselves somehow.
Yeah, back in, I think it was 92 when they first released the Admiral Byrd Lost Diary kind of thing. I was starting to get really, really interested back in like 1990 because I was looking for answers. Just too many weird things that happened to me and my family. So we read that, and of course I ascribe to the whole idea that ties in with Hitler and the Nordics and how,
Right.
these things tie together. And the Nordics are basically indistinguishable from like a Scandinavian.
Yeah,
maybe
they're indistinguishable from humans, Caucasian humans, and we surmise that maybe that's one of the reasons they've been taking our DNA, is that if they are living underground in bases for many, many, many years, we wondered if their race couldn't have become more sterile,
less genetically diverse. Yeah.
And that maybe they actually require regular infusions of DNA from surface dwellers.
That's a fun word to call us, surface dwellers.
Surface dwellers. Yeah, that's us.
Yeah, we also go ahead. Sorry.
So similarly to what you're talking about when talking about trying to control the genetics on Earth, if that's what's happening, and we're creating, they're creating essentially hybrids.
Yes.
What's the purpose behind that? Why not just? Is there issues essentially with procreation for themselves?
Well, it could be that, or it could be a program of reintegration with us, or a program of infiltration with us. When Eisenhower met with them, a lot of people don't believe that happened, but we do. When Eisenhower met with them, their main focus was they wanted us to denuclearize. They were quite alarmed that we were using nuclear weapons. That's why they started following us after like in World War II, they started following our plans. And that's why they're dogging our military now. And that's one thing we learned from the disclosure stuff over the summer, was that every single time our military goes out on maneuvers, they're there watching us.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Actually, some of the stuff that came out from, not just Grush, but one of the, watching those, the congressional hearings there, the subcommittee hearings.
Yeah,
one of the
Graves.
One of the pilots, we're in Virginia out here on the East Coast, so we have a lot of military.
Near the Red Rippers. Yeah, the Red Rippers are out there.
And my dad is retired Navy, so I lived a lot down towards the beach in that area, and it was actually astounding to hear some of the testimony from the fighter pilot who was talking about what was the cubes and that they were seeing in the sky, and like
it was the 15-foot diameter clear spheres that have black cubes inside of them.
Yeah,
and we've heard testimony that sometimes these black cubes are spinning like a gyroscope or a centrifuge inside somehow.
Yeah, and so much so that they were having to like do debriefs before they were taking off. Like, hey, just so you know, this is what we're going to do if this happens when we go out today. Which to me just lent a ton of credibility with someone with military background who comes from a military family. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you talk about when you're in them. Like, hey, this is what we got to do today. If this happens, be prepared for it. I mean, that's the way the military works. There's like a mission, and it's like, here's how we get through our mission today. This is and then this is what could mess it up. Don't mess it up. So it's for me, it sounded really believable the way he described it. But then it was just absolutely astonishing to realize that this was happening so frequently, like not that far from where I lived, and I hadn't heard anything about it.
Right.
Yeah. What did you guys think of those hearings? What did you guys think of? We've talked about this with some other guests. Do you think we've seen some sort of disclosure, or do you think we're getting disinformation? What do you think is going on with that?
It's a mix.
Yeah.
They conveniently change UFO to UAP, and basically they acknowledge that, oh golly gee, we know these things are out there, but we don't know what they are.
But
Which
at
is a
least they
mixed
changed that.
It's a mix. It's a mixed message.
For 80 years, it was just pure denial. This isn't happening. It's swamp gas.
Mass
It's, you know,
hysteria.
it's mass hysteria.
Yeah. Weather balloons.
Yeah, it's a weather balloon. But then, you know, the Luis Elizondo released that story to the New York Times with the 3 videos that are famous now, the Go Fast, Gimbal, and Tic Tac videos.
Yeah.
And there must be tons more of these videos that the government has if they're dogging us, our military, at every step we take.
Yeah.
So they're not disclosing that. But what they did do, which stunned us all, because we expected just the usual denial, they came out and said, these are real, this is a real phenomenon, and they released the full-length videos to the public and made a statement that said, these are real and we don't know what they are. Now, of course, they're still lying to us because we think they know quite well what they are and who they are. And
somebody does, yeah.
Yes, but they're at least they stopped telling us that it's not really happening. So we were grateful, you know, and now that it's been on the House floor, actually read into the congressional record that we have crashed ships and biologics. This was not new to us, of course, but what was news to me was that they're seeing this every single time we go out on maneuvers everywhere in the world. We are being followed. And I think it's because they're terrified of our nukes. So what gave both Leslie and I some hope was, of course, things like Malmstrom in 1966, I believe, up in Montana. There's 10 separate ICBM nuclear warhead silos that's like in a plains area, that they're all in separate circuits. And a UFO showed up at night, and the guards saw it and called down to the control guy, said, there's a UFO up in the air there. And the UFO went and basically deactivated each of the nukes one by one, all in separate circuits, just like it was nothing. Just to prove it to us that they can.
The Russians have talked about it. The British have talked about it too. They're showing us that they can deactivate, but you know, we have a lot of nukes. That means they have to also monitor the ones that are in submarines on the Tridents, and of course the Soviet fleet, and you know, even the Australians.
And so
we were actually just talking about that the other day. We had Preston Dennett on, and we were talking about that specific event. Bringing up the nukes, Leslie, because you were just talking about being terrified. Do you think they're terrified of the nukes, or do you think they're terrified that we'll use the nukes on our planet?
Well, since they have bases here, we think they're terrified for their own skin, if not for us. In addition to, you know, being afraid for us. And we think that's what the abduction phenomenon the integration thing might be all about. They didn't get what they wanted from Eisenhower. They did make a deal like Eisenhower will keep your secret for you. We'll help hide your existence as long as you give us dribs and drabs of your technology. And I think that's a deal that was made. But they didn't get what they really wanted, which was for us to denuclearize. And so I believe this hybrid breeding program is making people that can pass for human and they're trying to integrate it into our society and change it from the inside out so that they can achieve their goals that way.
There have been high-ranking Chinese and Russian officials that have been caught on hot mic when they didn't know, by reporters that have said that, you know, you'd be surprised how many of them are walking.
How many aliens are living
amongst us right now? You know, and they're, you know, children are being born with hyper, you know, with like call them star children. I saw a child, a 1.5-year-old boy sitting at a piano, just like a pianist, and playing a simple version of Clair de Lune by Debussy on the piano at the age of 1.5. And this is becoming common stuff.
Well, there's more genius children born than there used to be. And our DNA, they've proved, is only in the last 100 years has changed some 7%.
About 7%.
Which is unheard of. So,
well, our daughter did just win the spelling bee. So they are getting... I will say, Stephen, because you bring out the musician thing, that's one thing I've noticed. I think some of it's due from technology and the ability to find out information. But like what I had to learn guitar on and what I had to learn music on in the 90s when I was a teenager coming up, is vastly different than how musicians can gain information now. And so, like, in a lot of ways, I think a lot of musicians I knew that were learning how to play in the 90s were limited by the information they could get. And now someone who's like, hey, I'm 12 years old and I'm going to play the guitar, and they throw on YouTube and they can learn every skill and scale and technique and, just right from it. So I've always attributed a little bit of that, but it could be definitely some kind, especially when you're talking about a year and a half old.
A year and a half, yes.
Would be much different. Yeah.
I started on the accordion in 1967 and I hated it. My mom didn't, I came from a non-musical family. And my mom always wanted to, play music. So it was a time of Lawrence Welk and Myron Florin on the accordion. So
they're too young. They don't
yeah. So anyway, but anyways, I can play I can play 7 different instruments, including reeds and all that. But guitar for me, it was really simple. I already knew how to read and play music, and I was playing the clarinet. I picked up a book, learned how to play tab. And I said, okay, this is how you make the chords. It's very, very simple. And for me, it was and I started learning back in the 70s. So, it's just how your brain is wired, I think sometimes. I in the first 6 months of my playing music, I couldn't read music. I was faking it. I was in a class with like 12 other people, and always somebody would go and play a piece, a simple little piece before me, a new piece, right? Because they knew how to read music, and I was faking it. I was just doing it by ear until I had to play a new piece, on site. And then they found out that I can't read music. Then my mom sat down with me, and she helped to teach me how to read music. But I really didn't want to play music for the first 2 years of my life. Now I'm glad that I play in the Philharmonic up here. I'm the accordionist in the Joshua Tree Philharmonic.
Awesome.
So and we just did our Glenn Miller version of the Nutcracker Suite.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. All right. So another question I have from some of the stuff that you guys have talked about already is we've talked about seeing different kinds of craft, or at least different color craft, like seeing craft in a different way. Do you think that we are seeing different visitors, different extraterrestrials, different versions of things, or is it all coming from one specific type of alien, or the gray alien that we think of?
Well, we know that there's the Nordics, and we know there's the grays, and the reptiloids, and the insectoids. And then people are talking about the tall whites, which I believe is just another word for the Nordics, because they're tall, Scandinavian-looking beings. And then they talk about blue aliens. And I have to wonder, are they just seeing white aliens in blue light? Or is there yet a race of blue ones? But no matter what kind of changes they have to their physique from, say, the human model, they're all bipedal hominids. Mm-hmm. And we think that this race, they've been with us for thousands of years, this race of beings. And we believe that they utilize genetics just like we would use like any tool. So we think that, for instance, if you wanted to do a bunch of underwater work, we invented the scuba gear. In their case, they would probably just create beings that could breathe underwater. And possibly that's where the reptiloids have come in. And we think that this has been happening for thousands of years in our past, because one of the things I've always thought was strange is, why are there 300 different kind of dogs and 2 kind of lions? Why are there 1,000 different kind of cattle and 7 different giraffes? And we think that any animals that were domestic animals and utilized by humans have been tampered with genetically.
Yeah, they've been bred
to be more malleable, genetically malleable.
Easier cut and paste. Yeah, exactly.
Easier to breed into other forms and shapes that we want.
Yeah, I mean, we learned how to do that, so it would make sense.
We're doing it. Yeah.
Without human intervention, we wouldn't even really have dogs, right? We just have the wolf.
Yeah, just be like some wolf.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
And, but this idea that you can breed a Chihuahua from a wolf, I'm sorry, you can breed all day long. You can breed for 100 years and you wouldn't be able to turn
that was one messed up wolf
into a chihuahua.
Well, it's really interesting because one of the seminars I recently went to was the Jason Martell one at AlienCon, and he's talking about the development of the human brain, especially in the past 300,000 years, and the neocortex, which is pretty much the newest part of the brain, and with the dissections and looking at Broca's brain, which is what Carl Sagan talked about, the speech centers. It looks like that the genes that were dedicated to turn on the speech centers were literally a cut and paste job from the inside. It's like welded from the inside instead of the outside, which kind of blew my mind when he said that. And he brought up the chart. I said, "Oh, okay, so that's why 300,000 years ago, all of a sudden, ding, human beings start to be able to to develop speech and that kind of stuff." So. And also human beings have only been around that we know of for sure 122,000 years on the earth. So
that's Homo sapiens.
Homo sapiens
has existed for 120,000 years that we know
in our current form.
Right.
Yes. So what we've been doing the last 107,000 years?
Yes, mainstream archaeology would have us believe that for the first 107,000 years of our existence, that we didn't change much. We didn't advance much. And that doesn't sound like the human race to me at all. We're industrious people and clever little apes, really, and I just don't see us sitting around for 107,000 years without even inventing the house,
Well, I have a problem with that myself, only because we kind of know from the fossil record at this point that, we have this, well, I guess the way it's kind of portrayed in our society is that when you look back at like the caveman was less intelligent than the modern day human, but that's not the case.
No, if they were a Homo sapien, they were just as intelligent.
Exactly, just as intelligent, and even some of the other. I think I don't know if it was Neanderthal or if it was maybe it was Cro-Magnon, but one of them actually had a bigger brain than us. So the idea that these were just
about
like lumbering.
About 1,800 cc's. Yeah,
it wasn't as developed in the frontal cortex as ours. They were larger in back.
Yeah,
but they did have larger brains.
So I've always thought that was interesting because you said a human loose. That there's always some kind of ingenuity.
They're going to invent
This is what we do. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we did have a news story not too long ago where they found, oh man, I would have to find it out, but it was really old stuff, really old wood that was used to build like docks or some kind of structure that they found that was hundreds of thousands of years old. So I think, to a certain extent. So we've been doing
things on this planet and a lot of it was
a long time.
One of the most important things in our book, and this is big news, is the we knew that the Great Flood was real and that it was probably caused by a celestial impact. And then 20 years or 25 years ago or so, they discovered nanodiamonds in the soil of the Uccello horizon, the 13,000-year-old soil. And that means that it was definitely a celestial impact because nanodiamonds form in no other way. The dust, when a meteor's coming through our atmosphere or an asteroid, it brings dust with it and it superheats. And this dust forms these little tiny round diamonds called nanodiamonds. So they found a bunch of these nanodiamonds in the soil of way up north of North American continent and also in Europe. And it pointed to a celestial impact of some kind. And that's what caused the miniature extinction event that we had. The Clovis people were wiped out, the woolly mammoth, the mastodon, the dire wolf, the saber-toothed cat, and a bunch of other animals too, all wiped out at the same time. But they finally discovered the crater. We surmised all this time that the crater was under the ice sheet somewhere because of where the concentration of nanodiamonds were. And sure enough, what with the ice sheet on Greenland receding a lot, they've discovered the impact crater in under the Hiawatha Glacier in northern Greenland. So it's called the Hiawatha Asteroid Impact Crater. And they discovered that in 2016. And since we surmised that there was some catastrophic event in our past that threw us back into the Stone Age at one point, this went a long way to proving that theory for us. And then we were able to continue for real begin writing the book, because we needed that that extra evidence for our theory.
And this Uccello layer was first found in Europe, and has been found in 10 different countries on 4 different continents, and primarily in the northern hemisphere. So,
Yeah.
and it would have the vaporization of the 15 gigatons?
1,500 gigatons of ice would have been vaporized instantly and thrown up into the sky as water vapor and come down as rain, which would have then flooded the oceans with fresh water and kind of shutting off the
conveyor belt.
The conveyor belt of the ocean currents.
In fact, that's what we're worried about right now. They're talking about Greenland melting too fast.
Well, so that what happened back then was that we were on our way out of an ice age, and we were almost all the way out of it. And then suddenly, 13,000 years ago, it just reverses course, and we go right back into an ice age for an extra 1,100 years. And the soil of that era shows it. The Uccello horizon is a 1-inch layer of charcoal, showing that these 10 countries and 4 continents and all the forests were on fire at the same time, which is that also equates to a celestial impact, because you'll get these air bursts that will actually set stuff on fire when a meteor comes through the atmosphere fast, or asteroid. And then right after that is 1,100 years of climate change, a layer called the Younger Dryas boundary. So we knew we were looking for a crater, and then finally somebody found it. I mean, I couldn't go out there with an ice pick.
In other words, 25 years ago, we knew we had a dead body. We just had to find the murder weapon.
Yeah.
The murder weapon was the crater, which is about the size of downtown Washington, D.C. So it really makes a heck of a lot of sense when you just look at it. Also, the other thing we found, which is in our book, we found just how frequently these big events happen. They don't happen just like every once in a few million years. They happen a lot more frequently than people know. And you know, if you're an advanced race that gets tired of being knocked down back, you know, losing your technology, and you have the ability, you have the technology to go to a safer place, either you move off the planet, you stop the event from happening, or you go underneath,
or you sink.
You sink cities.
We call them arcs.
Arcs, yeah.
We think they literally saw because you know, a lot of the flood myths that we read about. There was a book written in the 1700s by Fraser that he hunted down 500 separate flood myths all over the world. And since that time, they've discovered a bunch more. There's like 1,200 now, completely separate cultures of people that have a flood myth in their most ancient lore. And a lot of these flood myths, they sound the same, one after another, after another, after another. It's like after the flood, we were almost destroyed, and a few remnants of civilization of humanity were left, but we were becoming barbarians and cannibals and regressing. And then a god shows up, and this god teaches us about math and science and agriculture and architecture, and brings us back up out of barbarism. And we think that these beings that are flying the UFOs in our skies right now were these creatures. That
in all cases too of these flood myths, there is forewarning. These people are given forewarning. So in other words, we were advanced, or whoever was here, if once the golden age, they talked about when the gods used to walk amongst us. Okay, there was forewarning. They knew either a year or two in advance, and either they chose not to act or they couldn't act. But
they were advised differently based on where they were, too.
Depending on the region, like Darren Kuyu, they built cities underground, 13 levels deep.
Yeah, the King Yima, and this is another one of these stories, but King Yima, this is in the Anatolian plateau of Turkey. Their god was Ahura Mazda, and Ahura Mazda told Yima, you're going to have a winter like you've never seen before, and you're going to have to dig an underground city and put some of your population there and bring your animals with you, and because you're going to have to stay down there a very long time. And we think that's what these underground cities that they found in Turkey are. And we think, of course, they've been reutilized, in later times.
By the Hittites, the Etruscans, the different,
But they found the levels, they found like tools from about 12,000 years old.
Mm. Did you guys happen to watch the most recent series put out by Graham Hancock that came out on
Yeah, we
Netflix?
saw a few of I don't think we've seen
Yeah.
all the episodes, but
that was
we
out
love him.
last year or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and they
He's
go.
great.
He goes there. They to the underground cities there in Turkey and kind of talk about that too. Because I mean, of course, that's
Yeah,
what he's
we'd
on.
love to have his budget.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
tell you for sure.
Yeah.
His travel budget. Yeah, we'd love that.
That was the first book I read by him was Fingerprints of the Gods. I think it's like
of
in
the gods.
94.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
94 or so.
We've
And
read
so,
it
yeah.
all of that stuff, you know.
There's a lot of very interesting, you look at the way, and that's another thing. You go back and you say, well, what's the oldest civilization? And, we get back to these certain areas. And then, as someone who studied history, you just realize it keeps getting pushed back further and further. And when humans supposedly, created civilizations, just gets back to push further and further. And we got some more questions to get to you, but give me 1 second. We're going to reset this a little bit. Welcome in, and thanks for hanging out with us here on the Witching Hours. Thanks for listening to us. To give you a couple places that you can go, first off, we're talking to Leslie and Stephen Shaw, and they have, we are discussing aliens, UFOs, and their book, who they are and what they're up to. I have the Amazon link up there, so you can go click on that link on top of chat. And if you're listening to us on YouTube or riding around in your car, listening to a podcast or whatever, there'll be the links in the description below that you can check out and click on and go check that out for yourself. And while you're there, you can visit us on YouTube. We're over on YouTube at the Witching Hours Podcast, and you can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on iHeartRadio and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those things. So if you're listening to us there, make sure that you click follow wherever you're at. And if they have the option of leaving a review, please do that, because it will help people find us over here in our little weird corner with all these other wonderful weirdos of the internet, and be able to participate in these conversations. Just
talk about more weird stuff.
Yeah, talk about more weird stuff. And just for everyone in chat, thanks for coming in, hanging out with us tonight. As always, we always appreciate all of you who are coming and hanging out with us while we do these shows. And I just wanted to remind you, if you have a question for Stephen or for Leslie, we have a cheap points redemption to highlight your message. And we're talking about a lot of interesting stuff tonight. So if you have a question for either of them, just highlight the message and we will get to it as we start coming up here pretty close to the last 40 minutes or so of the program. So if you have any questions, put them in there. I wanted to ask you real quick, as we talked about your book, is there any other places that people that you would like to send people to find out about you online, or is Amazon one of the best places? Where are you at?
Well, certainly Amazon is the best place to order the book. We're also on Ingram for bookstores. I know prefer to utilize Ingram, so we're on both. And then we also have a website, whotheyarebook.com. And we have several blogs there and some excerpts. And you can order the book via the email there, but this Amazon is probably best.
Excellent.
And then what about your
whotheyare.com?
Yes.
I got it.
Excellent.
Oh, and then we're on Instagram. On Instagram, we're kind of collecting information from people, and we're going to start posting videos about stuff that people have sent to us and their experiences. But also we have a lot of educational stuff on our Instagram page. And we're also on Facebook, and it's the same handle for both. It's leslie.shaw.author.
Can they get to that from your website as well?
I'm pretty sure, I think we have, I hope I have a link on it. If I don't, I'll will tomorrow. Oh dear. But yeah, just of course, on Instagram, they can type leslie.shaw.author and they'll get there too.
Okay.
I we mentioned something earlier. I just want to go back and touch on for a second before we get moving again. Stephen, you had mentioned, we had talked about seeing a submersible. When we were talking about the disclosure earlier, at first I didn't mind the renaming of it, because when they went from UFO to UAP, I started hearing the term USP as well. And so I thought it was a good idea to have a designation between an aerial phenomenon and seeing submersible phenomena, because you never really heard people talk about submersible phenomena. But I feel like that's disappeared already. Like they kind of switched what the terms meant and that went away. But, when you really get to talk to people who have looked into UFOs or listened to interviews of people who have researched this, or like our friend, Preston Tennant, who came on, who does research and stuff for MUFON, there's a lot of cases of submersible, and with the oceans being the way they are, I mean, covering a more majority of the earth than land, and being so much unexplored, what could exist under the oceans with these visitors?
We hear a lot about UFOs coming out of the ocean and out of lakes and out of volcanoes and out of the sides of mesas or mountains. So they just are, obviously they're able to go into, and then they'll zoom up into space. So what do they call it when it's transmedium?
It's transmedium. Yeah, they have no problem going.
And it doesn't seem to slow them down at all. They can move almost as fast underwater as they do in the air, it seems. Shoot away so fast that right in front of, there was the Wasp, I believe, was the USS Wasp was a submarine off the coast of Cuba, and they tracked USO activity, and their radar put it much faster than anything that we have that can travel underwater. And even still, that was a while back. And
it's like 120 knots or something.
Yeah,
like
something ridiculous amount. And then, of course, did you guys hear about the Lake Michigan sighting? Like 300 people called the cops saying there's a UFO in my backyard.
It's one of the ones, I think. Yeah, I saw it on a program, and it's become quickly like one of the most. It's one of the ones that just excites me the most, because so many people saw it, law enforcement saw it, and then of course, I think it was an episode of Unsolved Mysteries where they're talking to the weatherman who's working the radar that night.
UFO disclosure.
Oh yes. He had to move on to greener pastures.
Yeah. Who's completely looking at this through the lens of science.
72,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, and going straight down to like water level, and then going straight up into space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the sightings during that was this couple was camping on the beach, and they saw the UFOs up in the sky, and they saw that like a long column of water rising up into the UFO. And as they were going over Lake Michigan that evening, it was half the lake was frozen. So it almost like they were doing that weird triangulation thing where they'll zip over and then make a triangle, like they're looking for something on the ground or below them. And I think they finally found open water, and I think they literally had just gone on a water run. Like time to go get some water.
There's that farmer. Where is it, in Bolivia?
Yes, it was in
Bolivia.
No, I think it was in Peru.
Peru, okay.
But yeah, some guy. Peru is a hotbed of UFO activity that comes out of Lake Titicaca, and they're flying all over the place over there, and they're spotted over the monuments sometimes. So it's like almost like they're still able to glean energy off these pyramids somehow. So they're seeing them all the time there. And this one guy he was a rancher, and he was talking to a reporter, and he said the UFO came and it stole my lake. It stole all my water. We had a lake over there, and we used it to water our cattle and our other livestock. And the UFO came, hovered over the lake, and sucked up all the water and left. So this is the second time I've heard about water being sucked up into the UFOs.
Yeah, but look, with Lake Titicaca, the local natives have talked for going way back in their lore of seeing like dragons or different ships coming up out of Lake Titicaca, and this still happens to this day. People see activity in that generalized area.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I didn't steal all the water from Lake Michigan. That would have been a lot of water.
Or Lake Baikal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like another interesting thing, though. Like we're talking about the Great Lakes specifically. Like people, like it's used for shipping and all that stuff, but it's so cold. it's a place that you can kind of, if you're looking for a place to hide, I imagine it would be just as good as a lot of other places.
Yes, and
Mhm.
we think they are hiding from us.
I know we call it hiding, but I think they've decided that that's a better lifestyle and a safer lifestyle for them. You think about it, if the first generation may have had a lot of trouble adjusting to living underground, but you get 2 or 3 generations down the road, children are being bred and being born, and that's what they know. Being on the outside is like going like on a field trip.
And we're constantly being destroyed or damaged. Like down there, they don't have to worry about hurricanes. They don't have to worry about floods or
You don't feel earthquakes. I used to be
lightning.
I was a wild cave explorer in my early 20s, going through the deep mud caves and squeezing through little passages. I can't do it anymore. But because I had gotten over my claustrophobia at that point, having gone through the smoke chamber stuff in the Navy and doing the stuff you do when you're in. I was a Seabee, so you do some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So I got into caving, and I thought there was spelunking and then swimming across underground lakes, and it's just like there could be a huge earthquake, and because of the transference of energy, you won't feel a thing. Nothing will move inside of a cave. So
remember the earthquake in San Francisco during the World Series?
Yeah,
there were people in the BART, the underground Bay Area Rapid Transit system. They have one of the tunnels goes under the bay to the opposite side, and the people emerged after the earthquake, and they hadn't felt anything. They didn't even know an earthquake had happened. So they're safer down there. They don't have to worry about surface calamities, tornadoes and like I said, hurricanes and all the other things that can kill you up on the surface.
Yeah, one thing we know for sure about human beings that we are very adaptable. We will adapt quickly.
And I think the grays, if you look at the gray alien pictures, rare photos, or sketches made by witnesses, I see a human who has been living underground for 13,000 years, perhaps. Like they're grayer, they're paler, their eyes have gotten larger.
Less need for hair.
Darker. There's no need for hair down there. But they have the same bone structure as we do because they're moving exactly like we do. And they really are except possibly Bigfoot, they're the only other creature on the planet that walks perfectly upright. And when you think about this idea of them developing on different star systems, but having the exact same skeletal structure as we do, it makes just no sense to me. Even our closest relative on the planet is the chimpanzee, and look at the great, vast differences between us.
The bonobo chimp is just like
a variety of
1% different than us, and they still don't walk upright. They still have to use their knuckles.
Right, and they can make shift to stand and walk, but it's not their natural gait. And when they are frightened, they run on all fours again, and escape into the trees. They're still an arboreal creature, and that's our closest relative on this planet. We have a lot more in common with the gray aliens than we do with the chimps.
Well, here's another question for you. We talked to, well, go ahead, Jenny. I'll let you go.
I was just going to say, what if it's that we both came from somewhere else to here?
Right.
A really, really long time ago.
Yeah.
Like out of our scope of, out of our scope of our realm of understanding, like the time frame.
That's a really good point, because apparently when humans go up into space for any length of time, our clocks reset, our circadian rhythms resets to the day of Mars. Okay, so we do a reset. So yeah, there's possibility, obviously, that.
That's interesting. I've not heard of that before.
Once they hear
that's a true thing.
Once they hear our theories about, that really this is a separate race of humanity, separated many thousands and thousands of years ago. Well, people then say, well, are aliens involved at all? And if you look at the work of Sitchin, it talks about our race being uplifted 300,000 years ago from Homo erectus into Homo sapien. and then over time slowly changed more, and then Homo sapiens sapien is created. We actually put a fair amount of stock in this theory because of the changes to our genetic code that show signs of uplifting. And if we have been uplifted by an alien race 300,000 years ago, then all of us are part alien. It's one of our birthrights.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely something. There's something to it that, we still, science has never been able to figure out.
And we know definitively that our ancestors definitely had a way of manipulating rock and stone that we do not have to this day. I mean, Sacsayhuaman and these different areas where these stones, these walls were literally created to be earthquake proof because of the beveled and the fused cuts they're put together. Some of these things are 50, 80 tons, and they're just moving them just like it's nothing. And they have beveled edges. You look at Pumapunku. I did a lot of concrete pours when I was in the Seabees, and we've done a lot of concrete pours too, like doing stepping stones and cement pours, and these triple beveled stones that fit together with metal clamps on the inside, on the opposite side, that were poured like they had a smelting factory, and they poured these clips like almost like dovetailing them together so they wouldn't separate. These things look so uniform that they look more like they were poured.
They don't just look uniform; they are.
They are exactly the same.
And if they were hand cut, like they say they were done or something ridiculous.
No, they look more like to me that they were poured, because if they could melt iron and they could make these clamps, they could certainly and we know they can manipulate stone and definitely either fly stones into a certain area or walk the stones, like the legends of Java. Easter Island. Easter Island, yeah. Or just or fly them like a Namadal, the basalt piers, from 23 miles away.
The ancient stories of Pumapunku, they say that the stones were flown into place, and it took only one day.
The stuff at Easter Island has always been something that caught my attention, because I'm pretty sure, maybe it's easy to misremember things, but I'm pretty sure when I was a young frost giant, they only thought that the heads existed,
right?
And then later, Doug, and they thought that was a monumental achievement. Like, these things are crazy, like these giant heads on Easter Island. And then only when I became older, all of a sudden they started showing the pictures of them like digging out these bodies to go with them, which only added to this crazy achievement that would have been created on an island where nobody even lives anymore.
Actually, there's a small settlement of the people who have returned, but you're right. They were all wiped out.
But they were all wiped. So it's just so interesting, because you have this civilization that lived there, that was able to create these things, and then also was dealing with a habitat that at some point evidently didn't allow them to prosper anymore there. So I always thought that was interesting anyway.
And they've discovered finally, mainstream archaeology. They're slow to change. So new stuff will come out, and it'll take 100 years before they believe it. You know what I mean? And we have that problem with them for they still think the Inca were the people that made these monumental structures of Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman and Cusco and Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, I'm sorry. And they still attribute them to the Inca. And the Inca lived 2,000 years ago, and they were a bronze tool people. And the stones of Sacsayhuaman, and a lot of them at Pumapunku, and these are andesite. And andesite is harder than granite. So you can take a bronze tool and just start whacking andesite all day, and you'll just wreck the tool. It's impossible for them to have cut these stones. And then finally, they discovered under one of the pyramid structures at Caral Supe, they discovered some fibrous netting made out of grass, and they were able to carbon date it, and it carbon dated and stunned everyone. It carbon dated to 5,000 years ago. So we now know for a fact that there was a pyramid city building people in South America that 5,000 years ago that we know nothing about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're still thinking, and they're still saying it's the Inca, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
someone,
this is ridiculous.
Luce actually brought up in chat, just discussing, brought up the Olmec. And, that's interesting too, because we have stuff from the Olmec and we know that the Olmec existed. But other than that, we don't really know anything about them either. And, they predate the Aztecs and everything else.
Yeah, and the face part has the like a strong magnetic field on it. And they would have had to been able to know where the magnetic field was on the rock in order to be able to put it right at the face. And these are like 100.
I think the biggest one is like
50 tons or something.
The biggest one is like 50 tons.
Yeah, I believe so. And of course, when they moved the stone pre-cut, it would have been bigger. It would have been 60 tons. Yeah. And these people are, and how did they know what African people
were they all Michelangelos that knew how to levitate? I don't know.
I don't know. We don't know.
Well, that's always been a theory too of like, everything becomes so Eurocentric, and to a certain degree, it's understandable because, that's just who ended up kind of controlling societies in the West for a long time. That's the focus of how our history was told. But it's interesting, how many other cultures and how many other people, especially talking about what we talked about tonight, with humans being as intrepid as we are and as inventive as we are, I don't find it too unrealistic that people were traveling and going to different places way before we thought that they were, And so
we think that we evolved enough to put a base on Mars, a city on Mars, and we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago that I think we were more advanced than we are now.
The moon Phobos may also have some activity too.
The moon, Mars's moon Phobos, has a structure on it that nobody can explain. And when a Russian probe got kind of close to it, it suddenly was destroyed.
I wanted to go back and talk about at the very beginning. You're talking about the size of a human hair being, was it 63 or 67 microns?
Yeah, it's like 63 microns. I think it said in the news article. Yeah,
I got some information for you guys. Linda Moulton Howe did one of her disclosures. Okay, and they've analyzed some of these small pieces of the crashed UFO at Roswell.
Yeah, she combed the ground at Roswell with a metal detector and found pieces of it.
They've been able to find pieces. They've been able to find pieces people have, and they're laminated. They're laminated pieces of metal, and under an electron microscope, you can actually tell the micron size and actually what they're made out of, and it's fascinating. The outer part of the shield is about 200 microns thick of almost pure zinc and magnesium. The next layer inside is 2 to 4 microns in size, which is really small, of absolutely pure bismuth. The inner layer is about 100 microns in size of absolutely pure aluminum, which doesn't really exist.
We don't have it.
And it's dotted, and this aluminum is dotted with nanoparticles of uridium. And uridium only comes from meteorites. Okay, so that is what we've been able to determine as far as what the outer shield and the inner shield. And this is something that we cannot do. So that is what at least some of the UFOs, that's their composition. Those elements.
That's very interesting.
That is interesting.
It was fascinating to see.
We can do.
Yeah, we can't make that. Yeah.
No.
And you said that was disclosed by Linda Moulton Howe, huh?
Linda Moulton Howe at Contact in the Desert.
I'll have to check that out. Get some information on that because, yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
there is so much rabbit hole stuff out there. That's the problem we have sifting through stuff. Being when you see something physical evidence like that, if it being true and it has been analyzed, which I don't see why she would be lying about that. We have some actual physical proof. It's like when my coins were magnetized, and my dad and I saw it, and 6 hours after the event, I had a witness and I saw it, and I don't know what they hit me with. It wasn't electromagnetic. Maybe it was plasma. I have no idea what they did, but I've tried with really strong magnets to magnetize to repeat the same thing, and I just can't. I can't do it. And I've asked scientists about it. They can't do it.
There was something I wanted to go back to that you talked about at the very beginning, because and we're starting to get towards the end here. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about, have you had any revelations at any point about the missing time that we talked about at the beginning of the story tonight?
Revelations.
Well, he hasn't been able to break through those memory blocks. We've tried with hypnosis, but we think apparently it's hard to break through just with 1 or 2 sessions. It takes a time to develop trust with your therapist. And we just haven't maybe done it consistently enough with the same therapist to try and get through.
Okay, I think I know what he means by revelations. What I've come to the conclusion, as far as when most of these things were happening to, at least to me, I've had multiple other things happen that I'm not going to cover right now. Or maybe we don't have time, but I do believe that the purity of a person and the youth and the chi is a big part of their maybe being able to, and also coming from a family that has a medium and a spiritual background. I think it has to do with, for instance, I used to have this ability, and I still have it sometimes, where I will relax and lay on my back and kind of meditate. And when I was in my 20s, I would do this at lunchtime, just for a lunch break, and I would hear a radio station, just like it was just outside the door. And I was listening to people talking on radio stations. And I would get up and said, well, there's no radio on. Nobody's listening to radio outside. And I go back into my relaxed state, and I would be able to hear conversations, not inside my head, but outside. And I've come to the realization in my life that the purer you are, the easier it is for them to, and maybe the more interested they are in you.
It may be one of their criteria for judgment, because I have found in our research that there seems to be a psychic component of some kind. It seems to happen more to people who claim to have some psychic abilities or have worked on opening their chakras to gain these abilities. The power that Stephen is talking about is called clairaudience. And it's actually being able to hear into the astral realm.
Oh, Jenny knows about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And we actually did some astral work together, as far as chakra work together, where we did the meditation and the chanting and the opening of the chakras, and we actually gained the ability to astral project for a while. But in my case, the astral projection was fun. I would go, I've always been attracted to going into the ocean, but kind of afraid of it too. And so whenever I go astral, I go scuba diving because I can't drown and I can't be eaten by a shark. But in his case,
you went to Egypt once.
Yeah, and I went to Egypt one time to see the pyramids. And but in Stephen's case, as soon as he would go astral, he would be harassed on the other side by some sort of beings. Sometimes there's these little black beings, and sometimes it's a large black being with yellow eyes, and sometimes it's a creature that looks like me but then turns into a reptiloid. And
no, you turned into a giant snake.
I'm sorry. Well, it's still kind of a reptile.
This is in the morning. She went to go make coffee, and I was
Leslie. What are you not telling us about yourself?
Yeah, it was like this huge anaconda case. First, it was Leslie that came into the room, and then she turned into an anaconda, and then I was like fighting this anaconda, and then the real Leslie walked in.
Oh,
I said, you won't believe what just happened. But I still get out of my body. I got out of my body like about 10 days ago, and I was in the bedroom, and Leslie was sleeping in the on her recliner, in the, watching TV, and I got up. I just needed to go to the bathroom or something. So I got up and I went to the door, opened the door, and I couldn't open the door. I said, how come I can't open the door? And then I turned around and I looked and says, oh, I'm out of my body. So I went over and I looked at myself. I said, uh-oh, am I dead? I wasn't sure for a second. And then I got back in my body.
And then what was the next night? Something got into bed with you?
Oh, yeah. The next night, I was in bed, just got into bed. I hadn't gotten to sleep at all. And I felt like somebody had gotten into bed right next to me. And then I said, okay, what do you want? So, because this has happened so many times. So I woke up in the morning and I was going to get out of bed, and I was just laying in bed, and then it sounded like an Asian voice, a woman saying into my right ear, husband, right into my ear. It wasn't in my brain. It was like somebody was saying in my ear, husband. And Leslie's never called me that. It was like, I still have these things happening to this day.
Yeah. It seems like it's more, it's not happening in the waking state so much as it is now in the dream state or the astral state, that it's almost like they're just on the other side waiting for him to bother him again and harass him again.
Or to tell me something, at least.
So astral work for him is not easy.
It hasn't always been unpleasant, but it tends to be unpleasant. I used to practice it. I learned how to do it almost kind of just by, I read a book by Harold Lorraine, The Art of Astral Projection, like when I was in my 20s. And the first time I tried it was really wild. It was, I was reading, I remember I was reading the book The Silmarillion by Tolkien. I was 17 and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was with my parents at the Fallbrook house, and we had these, the swamp cooler system, right? And I put the book on the bed, and I decided to let me see how relaxed I can make my body. So my body became like, it felt like it was glued to the bed, but I was awake. I haven't felt this relaxed ever, that I can remember. And then I just said, maybe I can get out of my body. And I popped up right to the ceiling, and I was hovering right next to the ceiling fan. And then I thought, oh, cool. I'm going to show my parents that I can spy on them. I know what they're talking about. I wasn't in the room, so I start floating. I start floating feet first down the hallway. And then I get this weird vibrating feeling like I'm being dragged, like I'm going through mud or something like that. And then I feel myself being pulled back. So I got a little bit scared, I guess, because it felt like really strange. And then I popped back in my body. And for the whole rest of that day, I felt like I was not quite synced up. It's like both my bodies were kind of like a little bit out of kilter. But, for me, the astral projection is not a hard thing. It's the fear thing for me, as far as, the things
on the other side.
The things that I've experienced would curl your hair.
Yeah. He's so many times he's told me when he's awakened, just about ready to drift to sleep, and he's awakened by a loud 3 knocks. Bam, bam, bam on the wall right behind
my head, always 3 times. It's always 3. Or it would be a door slamming, just like somebody slammed the door really hard, or plate glass being broken. And then I've had some beautiful things happen too. I for instance, I know for a fact that chi energy is real, and I know too that the reason why the Tibetan monks, and the Sikhs and whatever, and the Swamis, why they sit in the lotus position 8 to 10 hours a day, because they literally are channeling the power of the universe. I've had that happen to me once when I was 22, the day after Christmas, at the Sonora House. Again, I was reading Paramahansa Yogananda's work, and it was that same little book, Metaphysical Meditations. And I was sleeping on my back at the time because, I was in the military and I liked a hard surface, so I read that meditation about 11:30 at night, put it down, covered myself with a blanket, woke up about 4:45. I know it was that because I saw the VCR clock, it said 4:45. And I felt, again, I was totally awake, and I felt like I was glued to the floor in a sense. And I thought about God's love, and not being necessarily a really religious person, but I was doing Tai Chi every day, and I was in, really good shape. And I remember feeling the love in my head head chakra, and I remember thinking the love in my heart chakra, and they both came together in a line, and they hit together at the third eye. And from like a billion miles away, this inverted pyramid, again, a blue-white light, hit me in the third eye and encased me in this blue-white cocoon of energy. And I just felt that was the most profound experience of my life. But in that instant, I realized what the Zen were talking about, having one pure thought of love, blended the yin with the yang, with the love, with the intellect. I understood. And at that point, I knew I had a choice: either that I leave the military and I go to Tibet and become a monk, or I continue working with my dad as a cabinet maker and finish building this house. And so I chose, of course, to stay and, not leave the country. But I understood. And it happened by accident. And it was about 6 months later, I was reading through a Psychology Today, and in one of the advertisements in the back at that time was a man laying on a stone tablet with a multicolored inverted pyramid of energy hitting him in the third eye, and he was encased in a cocoon of energy. This is in Psychology Today, 6 months later. And it said, you can achieve enlightenment through the Rosicrucians. So needless to say, I did not join the Rosicrucians. Yeah. I did not join the Rosicrucians. So, but I can tell you that it's real.
But that pyramid experience must be, somebody else has had it, or they wouldn't be drawing it, I think.
Yeah. And I've projected chi, and I've been hit by chi. I know these teachings are true, but a lot of it has to do with the purity of the person and the health and the youth. I think.
And also if they do the work, because Stephen was doing he was doing Tai Chi, which does open the chakras and does raise the Kundalini energy. So I think that's why he was opening himself up to all of this. And when I started doing it with him, I started having the same experiences. And it was actually the clairaudience that finally freaked me out enough where I stopped doing the work. Because I started hearing into the astral realm in the waking state. And so I'd hear somebody speaking right behind me, and I'd turn around and there wouldn't be anyone there. And I just realized that a life living in the 20th century America doesn't really fit in well with hearing voices behind you talking,
So weird is becoming the new normal, Leslie.
I guess that's it. Yeah, we have to evolve now.
Stephen, I wanted to tell you that you have absolute control over your own energy, which you know that from your energy work. So you can set up boundaries with all of these entities that are trying to bother you when you're leaving your astral body. You just have to be consistent, and you have to tell them, no, I'm not talking to you right now. You are not allowed to do this. You just have to be very stern and consistent over time, and you will protect your own energy from all of the things that have been pestering the shit out of you, apparently, for a long time.
Yes, in fact, you're right. In fact, I did confront the last time that black being was with the yellow eyes. I woke up again. It was dark in the room, but I woke up and it was standing right there looking at me. And I said, "What do you want? Tell me what you want." I decided not to get scared this time. I said, "Tell me." It wouldn't tell me, but it was just right there looking at me. And it's like I say, I'm to the point now where I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to be strong about it, because it's just
it's messing with his sleep, which is messing with his
it's been messing with my sleep. You're just starting to get the sleep, and then your cortisol levels rise, because you get an adrenal. I'm not going to get adrenal anymore. All right, okay, you're here. What do you want this time? Instead of make me to where I get I commonly only get 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night as it is, since about the age of 40. It's
it's not. What worries me is that they physically assault him. In these rooms. Too. Some like the snake attacking him, and he had a vision of being sexually assaulted in a coffin on the moon.
On the moon, yeah.
Very strange, but
that was around the same time we were doing our Kundalini work.
It kind of reminded me of the anal probe thing that everybody talks about as something that happens when they're taken.
But thanks for giving me that advice there, because it's good to be reminded by somebody
Which,
who knows.
One of our viewers, CMC, our boss, said, asking what they want gives them power. A command to be gone is needed.
Oh, let's try that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's
like, don't give them attention. Don't give them your fear. You just tell them, no, I'm not talking to you. I'm not dealing with you. You cannot be here. But you have to do it over a period of time and be consistent and strong. And you know how to control your own energy through your chi work. So you can use that energy, build it up within yourself and create this protective energy around you where they can't come in and, Snake Leslie can't come pounce on you in the kitchen.
Yeah, that was only once, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yes, thank goodness. Tell her about the weird being that tried to help you get out of your body.
We're almost done, right? We're almost out.
Yeah, we're getting close. we're pretty much up against it here, but I feel there's one more question I have to ask, talking about what we're talking about with UFOs and aliens earlier before we get to the end, because I feel like if I don't get there, it'll just bother me the whole night. You talked earlier about the meeting with Eisenhower and like the program that they have and all these things that we talked that have led up to one question for me, which is, why do they hide then? If they're why are not hiding, or why haven't they chosen just to make themselves open and possibly even just take over? Like, why go through all of these other things that we've talked about this evening?
Well, at this point, there could very well be, number one, that there's 8 billion of us,
and outnumber them. Yes,
and we speak about several thousand different languages on this planet, and we've got in America, we've got our stock market, and we've got our xenophobia. So there's a lot of reasons why they maybe it's not the right time yet for them. And
when the meeting with the Nordic alien, but with Admiral Byrd, they told Admiral Byrd in this meeting that they normally don't have anything to do with us. They normally don't like to have anything to do with us because we're barbarians, savages in their eyes. And he kind of kept calling him my son, like a wise old sage. Byrd described him as a man, which I thought was interesting. He looks like a Nordic Germanic man and spoke with a slight Nordic or Germanic accent. And they essentially told us to relayed the message to Byrd that they don't want to have much to do with us. They don't like us. We're savages and we're brutes and barbarians. And they pretty much try and have nothing to do with us and our savage wars and but now that we have isolated nuclear weapons and we have control of the nukes, they're incredibly alarmed about that. And they said, this is not for you. I don't like that kind of talking down to us like we're children, but in point of fact, we are kind of savages still. And I think that's the reason that they don't want to have much to do with us.
There is a theory that nuclear explosions don't just affect the physical, but they also affect the spiritual astral plane as well.
I wonder if that's true. Yeah.
If that is the case, then these beings that are more aware of the astral realms and the spiritual realms than we are would be very scared that we're going to not just screw up our own physical planet, but we're going to screw up something that's sacred to all beings, I don't know.
Exactly. And kill them too.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons they're so alarmed about our nukes. There's not a nuclear base or nuclear facility or nuclear research center that hasn't talked about UFOs hovering around it or affecting it somehow.
Yeah, Capuchin Yar, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you watch what they do, not what they say. What their actions are. Their actions are they are quite concerned.
Well, we've hit it. It's 10:05, so we got started a little late. We got started a little late. We went a little late, and that's okay. Leslie and Stephen, if you can stay on the line, and we'll talk again in just a moment. For all of you who are listening at another time, in another place, we will see you all next time.